For me, this is like homecoming in a way. Most of y'all I know outside of C12. So many of you, we've worked in similar industries. Abe, you and I were compatriots for many years, competitors. I don't ever consider people competitors. I just say, how can we complement each other? Will and Keith I've known forever. I've known Will since Trail was in Clemson. And so many of the rest of you, Randy and I knew each other. I served under Julie when she was chair of the Chamber of Commerce. I was vice chair of economic competitiveness. Known her husband Drew forever. I could go around this room, all the Tuesday C12 group. Just met Arlen today, who builds sheds, who I should have called before my wife got me to spend too much money on a dang potting shed. I should have let y'all, but if this thing doesn't work out, I'm calling you. Will, Pronks, there's so many of you that so you know me. Dan, Rundle, we're working on a project now we won't talk about. So, you've lived with me through business and through my faith and through lunches and through dinners. And so hopefully what I'm going to share with you today, I don't really have any notes. I've got one set of notes, and it's really something I'm going to read to you because I think it's that impactful. I know I don't sound like it, but I lived in Europe for many years. Had an office in London, had an office in Paris, office in Singapore, office in Hamburg, Germany. Lived in Maastricht in the southern part of the Netherlands, and I ran all of IBM Computer Associates and Parametric Technologies Executive Seminar Series. They had outsourced that to our company, and so I had to, literally, these were in the finest hotel ballrooms in the world, 3 and 4 hour technology presentations, the most highest profile executives of the biggest companies in the world, and so I had to staff these with presenters that spoke in 5 languages. Spanish, French, English, Italian, German, and I only knew enough French to eat well. That's all foreign, I could order, steak frites and profiterolles and things like that, but I had to go every now and then and listen to these presenters, and I had to grade them. You know how when you go to a presentation, they always hand out a survey. You got to fill out, how was the presentation? How was the program? Did you like it? Did the presenter do good? Did they have a mastery of the subject matter? And I would always do that, participate. I didn't want people to know that I was the president of this, organization. I was just a normal person in the audience, so I'd get my survey and I'd fill it out and grade it. Well, I got a call one day after doing that for about a year from my primary customer at IBM. Her name was Marielle Taylor-Villard, very refined French woman. She said, Toby, I need to see you. I said, I'm going to be in Paris next Monday. She says, can you come by in the afternoon? I said, sure. She said, I went by to see Marielle. She said, I got to ask you something. She said, you don't speak German, do you? I said, no. She says, you speak Italian? I said, no. She said, what about Spanish? I said, a little bit. French? Just enough to eat well. She said, I got to ask you something. Said, we have been reviewing all the surveys for all the technology presentations that we do. And she says, somehow you are able to grade the presenters correctly. She said, even when you don't understand the language, your surveys are consistent with what the audience is saying. She says, how in the world are you doing that if you don't even know what they're talking about? I said, let me tell you something. I said, Marielle, I look at 2 factors. The second thing I look at, I reverse these, is I look at what I call the head nod factors. I hope maybe I'll see some of that today. And the head nod factors, if the audience is doing this, then the presenter is getting the primary and more salient facts through to the audience, okay, if the audience is doing this. But I said the most important thing I look at, the primary thing I look at, is when the presenter walks on stage, how many notes does he have in his hand? And does the way he carry himself, does he have a commanding stage presence? So it's clear to me that he has mastered the subject matter that he's getting ready to present on. I said, the best way I know to describe that is he's teaching and speaking from he or she is teaching or speaking from the overflow. He's just letting come out of them what's in their professional DNA. And I said, I would describe this like this. If you're a professional and you're listening to somebody speak on a subject that you know something about, and you can tell whether they're telling the truth or not, and whether they know what they're talking about. I say, I can tell in 5 minutes whether the presenter has just learned what they're telling me or they've lived it. If you hadn't lived it, it's not credibility. Living it is credibility. And so today, this is about credibility. Credibility, and we'll cover this in detail, is knowing what you're talking about and doing what you say you're going to do. All right, now, let me tell you the couple things. This isn't a speech, and it's not a monologue. Speeches are for presidents, and monologues are for Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, and Stephen Colbert. All right? So you can interrupt me. This is a discussion. All right, so that's what it is. The title of this presentation is The Case for Authentic Leadership. Now listen, people use a lot of words when they talk about leadership. What are some words? And leadership's the most, it's like culture. I got it. Culture is the most important thing in the business, but it's the most overused, over-talked about, overwrought term in business today. Most people don't even know what it means, really. It's just the hot topic. It's the hot button. Leadership's a similar thing. How many books have been written on leadership, including I wrote one? Forbes got me to write one. It was supposed to be 150 pages long, and I just talked too much and ended up being 248. And I tell everybody, don't read the book. It's too dang long. I'm not really mean that. Just go to my author bio on Amazon. It's 1,015 words, and it's like the cliff notes for the book. All right, so you'll get a lot of it. But what are some other words when people talk about leadership? What are some other words that they use? What are some other words that they use when they talk about leadership? What? Servant leadership. There's about 10 different styles of leadership. Autocratic, laissez-faire, servant leadership, collaborative, democratic. What else? What's some other kind of leadership? Some good terms for leadership. Some good adjectives. Effective. Have y'all heard that? Effective. Transformational. Okay? There's a bunch of them. There's a ton of them. And most of them are overused. Here's the problem. My dad, when he got ready to retire, he hired a bunch of really smart, you can't talk about age in business these days, so I'll just say really smart, less experienced engineers than him. And he'd come home after a while, after about 6 or 7 months, no, after about a year, he'd come home and I could tell and I called him Pop. I said, and I could just tell he's in a bad mood. I said, Pop, what's wrong with you? He said, listen, I hired these engineers way smarter than I am to take over for me when I retire. Rocky, I forgot to mention you a minute ago. Rocky's probably my oldest friendship here because I taught your Sunday school class over 30 years ago, I think. 40? Oh, don't say that, Rocky. Come on. Long time, wasn't it? But my dad would say, he said, let me tell you something. So these guys, they're way smarter than I'm ever going to be. But said last year they requisitioned about $250,000 worth of engineering software that they wanted me to buy, and I bought it all. And said this year budget season came around. Now they requisitioned more than $500,000 of new engineering and CAD software. And he said, I told them I wasn't buying a dime. So they hadn't used 5% of the power of what I licensed for them last year. They're not getting anything. He said, the best way I know how to describe those guys is my new engineers, he said, they're theoretically priceless and practically worthless. And the problem with a lot of things you read and that you see when it comes to leadership is you can't easily put it into practice. All right? You can't easily put it into practice. How many of you ever been to hear a good motivational speaker before? Any names popped to mind? Name somebody. Just throw some names out. Oh man, he is the greatest sales guy of all time. His son's doing something now. Zig Ziglar's dead, but I'm telling you, when you heard him speak, he was incredible. Incredibly motivational. Terrific. Who else? Simon Sinek. Yeah, Simon Sinek. Yeah, all the books he's written, about why and he's terrific. Simon Sinek's great. If you ever watched any of his videos, he's terrific. Who else? Anybody? I'm not ignoring this side. I just know more people over here. Anybody else?
Yogi Berra.
Yogi Berra.
Yogi Berra.
He had some crazy sayings. He did. Interesting character. Played for the New York Yankees. Played catcher. Yeah, if you don't know that, you're just younger than me. Interesting guy. Well, let me tell you, here's the challenge and problem. This isn't a motivational speech. Anybody that's going to take your time for a day like C12 does all the time, and especially like I'm doing for the next hour, they need to major in the 3 E's. Everybody, I know I get made fun of for all this alliteration, but you're going to have to live through it today. The 3 E's. First of all, motivational speakers, they're good at the first E. They entertain you. Because if I don't do that, if they entertain you, if I don't entertain you, you're going to be looking at your phone, wandering off to the bathroom, wondering where the next break's going to be, figuring out who you're going to talk to and what you're going to do after this is over and where you're going. So the first responsibility of a speaker is I do need to entertain you of any kind. Number two, they need to energize you, and that's what a motivational speaker does. When you leave the building, you can't wait to slam your hand against the panic button on that door, panic bar, to get out the door, because you're fired up. Buddy, you're going to go change the world as soon as you get to work the next morning. You're going to go make everything completely different. You believe that you're way better able to make a difference and to make more money and to change people's lives and do everything. You're energized. And a speaker owes it to you to energize you. Here's the problem. The third E most motivational speakers don't do. Yes, they entertain you, and yes, they energize you, but they don't equip you. And 2 days later, all that motivation, all that vim and vigor is vaporized and gone, and you don't have another tool in your toolbox that you can to actually execute and perform better. So today, the objective of this, hopefully it'll entertain you. You won't be looking around or wanting to get up or wanting to go somewhere. Hopefully it'll energize you. You'll be fired up that you really can make a bigger difference. But the most important thing is that it'll equip you and it'll give you some concrete things that you can put into place tomorrow that's not only going to make your life better, but it's going to make the lives of those around you better. Not just at work, but at home, in your church, and in your community. All right? Here's the sad reality. What's the biggest gap in society today? Some of y'all, what do y'all think it is? What? Wealth. Biggest gap, no question, especially in our community. Julie and I, when we were on the chamber, we had some data that just said that Greenville is one of the most dichotomous economic communities in the nation, that the difference in distance between the haves and the have-nots here is massive. It is huge. It's the Greenville we don't see, because those people are not in our socioeconomic strata, and we don't see it. They're not in our line of sight every day. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That's a big gap, wealth. What else? What? Oh man, that's a good one. Hey, we're going to talk about it. Role models, that's exactly right. And I'm going to ask some questions. We're going to have audience participation in just a minute. You're going to help with that. You know what the biggest gap in society is today? It's the leadership gap. It's just what you said. It's the leadership gap. Now this is audience participation time. I'm going to ask for three kind of leaders in three areas. Name who y'all, as you think back, or think today, who are some of the great religious leaders of all time? Name some. Billy Graham, that's the first name I was looking for. Jesus, I'm going with Jesus. Hey, this contest is over, dude. It's over. Rob, you win. All right, we're going with Jesus. That's hard to beat. You're showing off. Anyway, what else? Who are some other religious leaders you look up to? Craig Rochelle. Okay, that's a good one. All right, good. I didn't think about that. Who else? Tony Evans, still here. Tony Evans has been around a long time. Pastor in Dallas, Texas, unbelievable, man of faith, great man. Who else?
Pope John Paul II.
Pope John Paul II. He's still alive or is he dead? I can't keep up with the popes. Got too many numbers. Gone. He's gone. Somebody said Dad. He's gone. Okay, cool. That's good. All right, I was in Italy this summer, so I saw a bunch of them, and they were not alive. But anyway, all right, business leaders. Name some great business leaders that you can bring to mind. Henry Ford comes to mind immediately. Invented, at least the automobile in the United States. Some people claim Mercedes had the first car, so who knows what the truth is. Who else? Great business leaders. Elon Musk. Okay, he's a current business leader. All right, who else? Steve Jobs, Jack Webb. Listen, I'm hearing the ones I wanted to hear. That's the only current one I've heard right there, Elon Musk. All right, what about political leaders? I'm ignoring that one, but anyway, no, I'm kidding. But Trump, current. I mean, truly men that you look up to. Ronald Reagan. Who else? George Washington. Who else? Churchill. Unbelievable. Churchill says, some of his sayings are just unbelievable. Who else? Franklin D. Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt. Tell me what's the most common factor, other than Elon Musk and Trump. What's the most common factor in all the names that we just named? Not around today, are they? We're having to look back a long way to find role models and icons and people that we can follow and trust and believe in. And the reason that the leadership gap today is so big is that the next generations that follow behind us do not have the kind of examples that they need to follow that give them the principles and the approaches and practices to be effective leaders going forward. They don't. And here's why. As a society, we've lost our appreciation and lost our respect for two things: for history and for anything that's old. We don't want anything that's old anymore. It's different. You go to Europe, the buildings are old. But in America, what do they do with old stadiums in America that are 20 years old or older? They blow them up. Anything that's old in this country, we have very little respect or appreciation for. You know, we just don't. It's not something we want to keep around. My dad, I'm going to read this. I said I didn't have any notes, and I don't. My dad died this year. He died January the 8th, 10:43 p.m. I was with him when he died. And I spoke at his funeral. I gave his eulogy. And I've written a lot of things in my life. You obviously got a book that I wrote, which, you know, I hate self-promotion. I hate notoriety. And you're going to find that out. This guys, our legacy of leadership is not about us. Okay? It's that simple. But what I wrote, and all the things I've written, all the articles I've been fortunate to have had published, and the things I've used to teach and to share, none, I think, have meant as much to me as the eulogy that I wrote for my dad. I've only shared it with one person. Chad, that's you. You're the only person that I think I've ever sent that to. But I'm going to read this to you because it epitomizes why we don't have the kind of leaders to look up today that we have to have if we're going to be a viable Christian society and successful country going forward. I believe this is true. This is one person's opinion. This is mine, but I believe it's true. The world we live in today is fascinated with and places an inordinate level of importance upon people and things that are new and shiny, cutting edge, technologically advanced, hip, cool, young, and fresh. We follow, admire, and idolize people that exhibit high style, but sadly low substance. Social media is our communication medium of choice, and in many cases, we would rather spend our downtime watching TikTok, YouTube, or Vimeo, or messaging, posting, or texting with individuals that in many cases we don't know very well, rather than hanging out with those we do. Today, our society has largely lost its appreciation and respect for anything that has a little age or rust on it, and we discount and discard people and possessions that may be a little threadbare and are now displaying a few cracks and wrinkles. And even though one of the most revered and admired character traits for which we should all strive is wisdom, which only comes about through time, experience, and a willingness to listen and learn, most of us view gray hair as a liability rather than an asset. I'm going to skip some of this. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Was that me? We all need to remember what God says. It's probably me. Hold on. We all need to remember what God says in 1 Samuel 16:7. For God sees not as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. God doesn't care what your family name or pedigree is, where you live, what your address is, what you drive, how you look, how many educational degrees you have, or how much money you have in the bank or your 401k. At his very core, my dad knew that. My dad knew and understood God's economy and God's value system. And today, we're going to take an honest look at God's value system in business. First of all, I want to give you an object lesson. I've got a book. It's no longer in print, but people are always talking about using terms that they really don't understand. In this book, I'm going to show you how much I've used this book. It's actually come apart, okay? It's in two pieces. And what I'm getting ready to show you on this slide, I stole from, I'm giving credit to Linda Martin and Dr. David Mutzler. There's a book called Fail-Safe Leadership. It's written in first grade size type. It's only 138 pages long. And if you can find it, I have 4 in my office. You see all the billboards around town. Alan Clardy, the Clardy Law Firm, personal injury lawyer. Well, Alan and I have become friends. And he literally, Alan went out and scoured the internet, and he bought every last copy he could find and gave them to me. All right? But everybody said, what is leadership? What is leadership? What are we called to be as leaders? What's the simple description? I'm going to give you a contrast. What's the simple description of a great performer or a great producer? A great performer sets goals and achieves results. Here's the problem. In our society, we don't have a performance or results-based model for leadership. It's a personality or character-based model. We get drawn to people that can give great speeches, and they're great orators, and they're dynamic, and they're charismatic. Let me tell you something. That doesn't make you qualified to lead. You see some great TV personalities, you know, whether you love or like Oprah, don't like her, whatever, just because you're a well-known personality does not make you qualified or credible to lead. All right? At the end of the day, you have to know what you're doing. So a great performer, listen, we need to get our mind straight and let's move from a personality or charisma-based leadership model to a results-based leadership model. How can you say, I'm a great leader, if you don't achieve the end objective or desired results? People may love you. You may be charismatic. You may be a great orator. You may dress well. You may have plenty of money. But are you able to get to the end goal that matters? What did Patrick Morley say when he wrote the book, The Man in the Mirror? The worst kind of failure is to succeed at something. It doesn't really matter. Are we achieving results that matter for an eternal difference? That simple. Nothing else, all the accoutrements, looking good, big off, none of that matters. Are we setting goals and achieving results for things that matter in the long run? That's why C12 exists. And that's why we use business as a platform to get that done. There's a difference between doing the job and getting things done. Sometimes I'll deal with an employee, and they say, well, I did this and this and this. I said, look, I'm not paying you to do the job. I'm paying you to get the job done. There's a difference. What did John Wooden say? The greatest basketball coach of all time. Won 10 national championships in 11 years at UCLA. Never mistake activity for achievement. Never mistake activity for achievement. You can be going through the motions, you can be doing all right. At the end of the day, we got to achieve the end results. We got to hit the goal. What's the simple description? If that's the description and definition of a great performer, what's the definition and description of a great leader? Only 2 words separate a great performer from a great leader. A great leader sets goals and achieves results, just like a great performer. What's the 2-word difference? Through others. It's not about us. All right? It's through others. Jackie Robinson. Y'all know who Jackie Robinson was? First African-American professional baseball player, number 42 for the Brooklyn Dodgers. That's on his tombstone. A life is not important except in the impact it has on others' lives. Not just does it benefit me. That's Jackie Robinson's epitaph. So what's if it's all about others, what's immutable leadership principle number 1? It's not about you. It's not about you. Not about me. I'm going to give you a history lesson, legacy leadership model. In the South, everybody knows this. For years, the people that had all the power were the people that had all the land, right? Landowner model. So single feudal landowner owns all the resources, makes all the decisions. How does that work? Walks out on sometimes people call this the plantation model. Walks out on the front porch every morning after a 10-hour perfectly restful sleep, summons all the minions out of the field, tells them exactly what to do. They go out and do the bidding of the plantation owner or the landowner. That's great for execution, but it's terrible for human advancement and human development. Now, most people would call that, people call it professional development, right? Human development. That's what they call it. I've quit using that word. Here's why. You can lift weights. You can put a hamster on a wheel. That hamster can run that wheel at 17 miles an hour and get stronger and stronger and stronger. But guess what? It ain't going anywhere. You're still on the wheel. There's a difference between development and advancement. All right? We need to exercise our mental, intellectual, spiritual, and physical muscles in a way that's going to make a difference as we go forward, not just to be stronger for its own sake. For years, our own businesses, civic organizations, associations, churches, government, all subscribe to this model. What Jim Collins called a shining star with 1,000 helpers. This is my company. My name's over the door. It's all about me. Y'all do my bidding. I'm going to tell you what to do. But all the glory and most of the wealth and most of the money accrues to me. Guess what? It's about me. That's the plantation feudal landowner model. Let's look at Greenville and Spartanburg. Guess we all live in the upstate. Some of us may live in Anderson. Some of us may live at other places that are part of this. But here's a perfect example. For years, what I called the iconic leadership model, there were a few leaders in these communities that if they wanted it to happen or didn't want it to happen, that's what occurred. I just put 5 names up there, more of the iconic leaders in Greenville for the years. Buck Mickle, Daniel Corporation, Charlie Daniel, he was Daniel Corporation, Max Heller, Mayor, Tommy Weiss, Bill Workman, I can name a bunch of them. But Greenville's pace and direction was set by very few iconic leaders that if they said it, that's what we did. Spartanburg was the same way. 3 primary, and Roger Milliken, he's dead. Bill Barnett, the mayor from 2002, 2010, who's a good friend of mine. George Dean Johnson, who's still a huge commercial magnate today. The new minor league ball team that's going into Spartanburg is a perfect example of those gentlemen right there wanting something to happen. Guess what? It happened. All right? But today we're going through a community leadership metamorphosis. In recent years, upstate legacy business and community leaders have recruited and welcomed newcomers to lead key commercial, civic, and cultural initiatives. Craig Brown, who's probably my best friend, is a perfect example of that. Here's a guy who grows up in Michigan, goes to Michigan State, is an accountant for Arthur Anderson, gets hired by a small ad agency in Connecticut, and grows it into the largest privately held ad agency in the world, ultimately sold to Publicis Corporation. He buys a baseball team, he comes to Greenville, but he didn't just engage by just putting a baseball team in Greenville. He revolutionized the west end of this city because Fluor Field became the anchor tenant for the west end and validated all the growth beyond the Reedy River. That is absolutely not, you can't even debate that. It's real. It's true. But he didn't stop there. From social justice to philanthropy, the head of the Prison Board of Health, he's engaged on all fronts. And I've said that changed Greenville's mindset. Used to be, if you're not from here, hey, guess what, dude? You're not welcome. But now if you show up with half a mind and a willingness to work and you're going to bring something to the table, you're in. And there's a whole bunch of more people like that. I keep an Excel spreadsheet that has about 200 names on it, and the tab on the bottom is upstate influencers. And depending on what we need to gun, we've distributed that leadership across a broader base of people that can make a difference in this community and make Greenville what it can be, not just what it is today. All right? So I don't maintain that list as rigorously as I do now, but I promise you when I was Vice Chair of Economic Competitiveness for the Greenville Chamber, when we had to get something done, I started at the top of that list and went down. So today our communities have largely migrated from an iconic leader model to a distributed leadership model. How does this play into us as Christian leaders in our business? Here's how it works. Let me tell you something. We need new leaders. Because if we don't replicate us, I say this all the time. The most inevitable thing about life is death. But we all live like we're immortal. The most inevitable thing about life is death. But we all live like we're immortal. We say we have a succession plan. We really don't. We really don't. We just hoping we're going to live to be like Methuselah. And nothing's going to happen to it. It's not going to be that way. You got to plan ahead. You got to think. Here's why. Today, when Forbes asked me to write a book, they said, we want you to write a book on your model for leadership. I said, I won't do it. They said, why won't you? I said, let me tell you why. I said, what I did 5 years ago or 2 years ago, it worked then and it worked for me. I said, we live in such a dynamic world, socially, culturally, technologically, competitively, that what worked today, 2 years from now will be marginally effective, and 5 years from now it'll be bankrupt. So I'm not going to write. You see all these how-to books, how to be the greatest, how to be the greatest engineer, or how to be the greatest salesperson, how to be the greatest accountant, how to be the greatest marketer. Guess what? Most of those books after 10 years are completely ineffective because they don't apply anymore. Because we live in a world that changes that quickly. The areas of life and business in which we can truly be an expert getting narrower every day. You know why? Because there's so much science, so much knowledge, so much information, so much marketing, so much technology, so much engineering in everything we do. You can't be the expert in everything anymore. It's like BMW. BMW doesn't manufacture the ultimate driving machine. They assemble it. You know why? Because the only two things that BMW has maintained its core competencies in are bodies and engines. Bilstein makes the shocks. Lear makes the interiors. Goodyear, Dunlop, Michelin make the tires. ZF makes the transmissions. You know what they are? They're designer, system integrator, tester, assembler, marketer, seller, distributor, service organization that assembles the ultimate driving machine because they can't be the world's best at every component that goes into a car. And we can't either. And if we think we're the centerpiece and have all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present in what we do in our businesses, it's going to die when we die. And our influence is going to die when we die. So no one individual can ideate, activate, implement, operate, or lead all the disciplines and best practice processes that it takes to operate and grow a business, a community, an association, a church, you name it. Guess what? We're just not that important. We're not. We need each other, all right? To thrive over the long term, we need to install an approach that develops and distributes leadership across a broader spectrum of talented and called people. I'm going to explain this to you. We all believe that we're successful in business because we're driven. You know, God doesn't want driven people. He wants called people. There's a difference. God says, where I have planted you, I want you to stay until I call you somewhere else. He wants people that are called to our businesses, that are called to ministry, that are called to a mission, that understand the purpose and vision and mission and values of our organization. And they're not coming as employees, they're joining in the mission. They're joining in the mission. So we need called people, not driven people. Breaking news, guys. It's our responsibility to develop the leaders God wants and the world needs. It ain't gonna if we don't do it, it ain't gonna happen. It ain't like we ain't got a second string. It's only this team. It's our responsibility to develop the leaders God wants and the world needs. And all you have to do is look around us at there's plenty of good examples of leadership. But all you got to do is look for the bad ones, you know? Business is a platform for leadership development. Number one, I want y'all to listen to, here's the realities of commerce. We can say anything we want, have any great platitudes and generalities, any great mantras or sayings, but the fact is, man's primary measure of business success and significance is money. All right? Man's primary measure of business success and significance is how much of the green tickets with dead presidents you've accumulated. Right? That's why we have balance sheets, income statements, cash flow statements. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying it's reality. And if we tell ourselves otherwise, we're deluding ourselves. Here's the rub. God's only measure of success and significance is people. All right? So here's the deal. Man's currency is money, and God's currency is souls. And those two things are not one and the same. So how do I tell which one's really getting my attention? I've had this acid test for more than 40 years. And I want you to be honest with yourselves when you take this test and answer this question. This is going to tell you what's truly important to me. When I think about business, and listen, even when you think about the 5-point alignment matrix, I want you to think about this. The 80-20 rule is the 80-20 rule because it's the 80-20 rule. It applies to almost everything in the world. It's real. Look at the 5-point alignment matrix. Got 5 components, doesn't it? Revenue, operations, organization, finances, ministry. It's the 80-20 rule. Even though 4/5 of that equation are things that are relevant to the core metrics of the business, and one of them is ministry, I would challenge each of us that we spend 20% of our thought time, 20% of our work time, 20% of our money on the ministry side. And here's how you're going to tell what's important to you. I want you to answer. Don't do this out loud. You might commit hara-kiri. But answer these questions. First of all, what I talk about. What's the majority of my conversation about? Number 2, how do I spend my time? And number 3, how do I spend my money? All you have to do is look at those 3 things. That's going to tell you what's truly important to you. What I talk about, how do I spend my time, and how do I spend my money? And if we're building great businesses for a greater purpose, then we need to rethink the elements of that equation and because that's what's really important. So we need an expanded scorecard for business success. Now, I didn't say a substitute. We still have balance sheets, income statements, and cash flow statements. Guess what? Money matters. You don't keep the business running and operating, you're going to have a lot of people without jobs, and you're going to lose your platform for ministry. So guess what? The business performance and metrics matter. It's not about saying they don't matter and we need to focus on something else. It's both and, not either or. We can no longer gauge success by traditional measures. The leaders in this room, this is my challenge to y'all, because I know a lot of you. Here's the traditional measures of our success. 5 P's: position, power, pedigree, pay, and privilege. I got the right parking spot. I'm making the most money in the company. I got more privileges, more vacation and PTO time than anybody else. I got all the power, and I got the title. Y'all have heard me say this. An organization chart may give you a position, but only people can give you power by trusting and respecting you. No title on an org chart can make that happen. Only you can make that happen.
Toby, the 5 P's again.
Right there.
Can't read them.
Performance, position, power. Well, now that's 6 of them, aren't there? Performance, position, power, pedigree, pay, or privilege. I must have stuck a new one in there, Rob. All right? My individual performance, that's not the measure of success. Collective team performance is the primary measure of business health and success. It's not how am I doing, it's how are we doing. Okay? It's not how am I doing. It's not about me being a hero or being famous. It's about how are we doing. But an eternal change in others' lives is the measure of a leader's personal impact and his or her legacy. What does Isaiah 48? The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of our God endures forever. All right? What is 1 Corinthians 3, 12 through 13? I've got that on my phone. I can't quote that. Now, if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become clear. For the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test each one's work and what sort it is. Listen, there's 2 things you can devote your life to that are going to be gold, silver, and precious stones, and not hay, wood, and stubble, and not get burned up in the fire. That's God's word. What does Isaiah 48 say? The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of our God endures forever. So God's word. And number 2, people. Whether it's me or Rocky or Abe or Grant or Jeff or Joe, the question is not whether we're going to be living 10,000 years from now. It's what's our address going to be. And that's the same of every employee and every trading partner you come in contact with in your business. Guess what? They're going to be living somewhere 10,000 years from now. The influence and the leadership to give them an opportunity to live in a place that's the best that it's ever going to be is up to us. Immutable leadership principle number 2. Authentic leaders create lasting impact. Now I'm going to get, the next slide is a very convicting slide, but I want to explain it. Prerequisite, authentic living precedes authentic leadership. Let me tell you something. You don't have, this came up, I love what Mike Scherer said and what all of y'all said. Jeff, Joe, Grant, because y'all really provided a foundation for what I'm about to say. You only have one life. You don't have a business. You can't compartmentalize. You don't have a business life and a personal life and a church life and a community. It's not that way. Listen, sooner or later, if people see a huge disconnect between who you are in private or who you are in business and who you are in public, they're going to lose their trust in you. It's that simple. All right? I have 6 rules for running a business. I'm not going to go through all of them, only 6. The first one is we're not going to do anything illegal, immoral, and unethical, and we're not going to get close to anything that even smells like that. So if somebody offers us $1 billion opportunity, but there's just something about it that just doesn't feel right, pretend you're Nancy Reagan, just say no. All right? We're going to make that decision today, and we never have to make it again. But my second rule of running a business, and HR people hate me for saying this, but I'm going to say it, I expect you to behave in a way both at work and away from work that reinforces and reflects our company values and culture. It makes people trust you as a person, and when they need the kind of products and services that we sell as a business, they'll transfer that trust to our business. And that is absolutely real. If they distrust you as a person, they're not going to do business with you. That doesn't mean we're perfect. If we were perfect, you don't need Jesus. Okay? It's that simple. You don't need Jesus. We know we're all hypocrites to a degree. But generally that is true. The way that we live needs to be congruent with what we say. Authentic living precedes authentic leadership because over time, people can figure out if you're real or you're fake. They'll figure it out. And then you've broken that trust equation. It not only hurts you and your reputation and your family, it hurts your business because they connect the two. They connect you 3 with C12. They connect us with C12. They connect me with cargo and now with NextTrack. And if they doubt me, they're going to doubt what I'm telling you from a business perspective. Authentic leadership begins with integrity. Integrity is simply doing what we say we're going to do. Incongruities between what we say we're going to do or what we actually do and our core ideology is hypocrisy. One of the things I believe is talk less and do more. Nike's got the greatest tagline in the world. In fact, you don't have to talk at all. Just do it. You know, Dizzy Dean, y'all know who Dizzy Dean is? But great baseball player, great pitcher, pitched for the St. Louis Cardinals. Like to drink a little beer every now and then. He was in a bar one night, you know. He was talking to some guy about he had pitched a no-hitter. Well, a guy at the end of the bar didn't know who he was and said, man, stop with all that stuff. You're just telling some wild story. And Dizzy leaned over, it's true. He said, look, son, if you done it, it ain't bragging. All right? Just do it. You got to deliver. Nike's got the greatest tagline, just do it. Integrity is ensuring that our behavior consistently aligns with our core ideology. C12's got a great saying. You can find it in almost everything that we publish and produce. Right there it is. Priorities are what we do. Everything else is just talk. Most of y'all know about, where's my little blue book? Y'all got one. That's one. This one. This is how I keep, in fact, I always say, I teach this every year. We now have them their NextTrack branded, but we say, look, it's not about time management. We all have 24 hours in a day. It's about priority management. What's really important? There's a lot of stuff you don't have to get done, and it's really not going to matter in the long term. But there's some critical things that you absolutely have to get done because they're going to make an eternal difference. It's not time management. It's priority management. Priorities are what we do. Everything else is just talk. Now, I talked about a core ideology. Now, this is something that I want y'all to go home, and I want you to make sure you answer for yourself. How many of y'all got a mission statement for your company? Most of you, I'm assuming. How many of you got a purpose statement? Most of you got a purpose statement? Got values? All right? Got vision? The problem is people use these things and they become plaques on the wall, and I'm going to tell you what I've done for 30 years. Is that every time I go into business, I think the last one was McMillan, Pasden, Smith Architecture, I ask them, can I take a photograph of your core values? I have them compiled over 30 years. I have over 120 core values. And when people say, what should we do for core values? I send them that list. I said, use this as a start. These may not be, you may not find one that exactly resonates with you, but you can use this as a launch pad, a jumping off place to get there from here. But most people don't understand what core ideology really is. And so the challenge is this for y'all. I'm going to give these 4 definitions for you, and I don't want you to ever forget them, but I also want you to remember this. You need to answer these for yourself first before you answer them for your business. Because if your personal core ideology is in conflict with your business core ideology, you need to fix your business or you need to go somewhere else. All right? If your personal core ideology is in conflict with or runs counter to your business core ideology, you need to fix it or you need to go somewhere else. So I'm going to simplify these terms. We throw these terms around in business all the time, and most people don't understand it. Number 1, purpose. Why do I exist? And for your business, why do we exist? That thing needs to be long-term, eternal. That doesn't change every month or year or week. Why do we exist? All right? You need to think about what's my purpose as a human being? Why do you really exist? That needs to transcend your entire life. Number 2, vision. What do I want to become? There's a book called Disciples Are Made, Not Born. It's been out for 50 years. It says you're 85 years old. You got nothing to look forward to except death and nothing to look back on except memories. What are you going to need to see in your life in order to determine beyond a shadow of a doubt that your life was a success? What's your wife going to say about you at your funeral? What are your children going to say about your funeral? What's your pastor going to say about you? And what your business colleagues going to say about you? That's what you want to become. That's your vision. Vision is what you want to become. What you want to be known as one day. Who you're going to be. It's in the future. All right? Number 3, mission, shorter term. What do we want to achieve? For me to one day achieve my vision, what are the things I need to accomplish or attain? What are those things, those OKRs, objectives and key results, that are key to making sure I become what I'm supposed to become? That I achieve my personal best, that I become who God wants me to be, that I make the influence God has planned for me to make, what I want to achieve. And the last one, values, people put all this stuff up. A lot of it's bogus. Here's what values really mean. What character traits do we commit to embrace and consistently embody? What character traits do we commit to embrace and consistently embody? What do we say? Parties are what you do, everything else is just talk. This is your behavior. Your leadership legacy. A lasting legacy of leadership is not measured by what you or I do or accomplish, but instead by what others become, do or accomplish as a result of our investment and impact in their lives.
And that's in the book.
That's in the book. That's in the book. That's in the book. My success as a leader is not about the fact I get asked to speak today, or I get to write articles, or people pay me money to come. It's not. It's did it make a difference in your life? An authentic leader's signature question is, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? I try to end every single meeting when we end. Jeff, what can I do for you? Grant, what can I do for you? Pray for somebody. You know, and here's the thing. People say, well, I asked them, they told me, but I don't have time. Time's not a denominator in that. It's not a factor. If you ask somebody that question and they tell you, and they give you an answer, and you have the talent, the experience, the expertise, and the resources, forget time to do it, you ask the question, integrity says, I'm going to do it. I said this, some of y'all were at my book launch back a year ago, September. And most people get up and they thank their spouses, their wife, or their husband for supporting them. And I didn't do that. I said, let me tell you something. This Susan has put up with me coming home late nights, being part of groups and association and economic development and health care and education in this city, because she knew that my calling was to, if I asked that question, I had to do it. I tell everybody I might be late because sometimes I overcommit. But if you tell me, Keith, I asked Keith, what can I do for you? He said, we need you to do that. And I've got the resources, the experience, the expertise, the talent. Forget the time. I asked the question, Keith, I got to do it. You know, that's a leader's signature question. What can I do for you? You know why? Because it's not about me. Immutable leadership principle number 3. Influence is not the same as leadership. And this is just for this group. All of y'all are highly influential people in the upstate of South Carolina. You are. But influence is not the same as leadership. All right? Influence can be sporadic. Influence can come and go. Leadership requires commitment. Leadership requires time. Leadership is measured by the success of others, not by your own success. Leadership is selfless. Leadership transforms. It transforms institutions, organizations, businesses, communities, relationships, churches. Ultimately, it transforms lives. Influence and leadership are not the same. How do you, as people of influence in this community, transform influence into leadership? First of all, what's the definition of influence? The act or power of producing an effect without apparent exertion of force or indirect exercise of command. Have y'all just been around people, they've just got some charisma about them. They just draw you in. They're just being themselves. That's the problem. Influence many times is not intentional. It's not directional. It's just a product of personality or charisma. It's just who somebody is. Some of us have more personality, charisma, can speak publicly. My dad had a great saying. He said, Toby, let me tell you something. He said, everybody comes into this party, to this life, with about the same number of assets and liabilities. Some people's liabilities are just more visible than others, and some people's assets simply garner more public acclaim. That doesn't make one of us more important than somebody else. What did Ken Blanchard say when he wrote The 1 Minute Manager? You know, I'll show this later on. He said, everyone's a potential winner. Some people are disguised as losers. Don't let their appearance fool you. All right? So influence is not directional or intentional. It just happens because of who you are. And you don't ever know when it's going to happen. It's not consistent. Clearly, influence is a powerful force that creates an effect, but the direction and result of influence can be positive or negative. Influence can be negative and intermittent. Think about who the most popular people were in your high school. Some of them were crazy, weren't they? Being out drinking, partying, having a big time. Everybody loved them. You know why? Because they just drew people to them. I still remember going to my 15-year high school reunion. You know what the thing that struck me about my 15-year high school reunion? I've been to my 50th too. Don't ask me how old I am. Just went to my 50th over a year ago. The ones that were the most popular and the coolest and the hippest, and then the ones that were quiet and reserved and maybe more intellectual, in over 15 years, they had swapped places. They had swapped places. I used to tell my Sunday school teachers when we taught a big Sunday school class at Taylor's First Baptist Church, I said, don't get enamored, overly enamored with all those kids today that are in discipleship group and they're having their quiet time and they're praying. I said, let me tell you something, 4 years from now, half of them are going to be exactly the opposite. I said, don't, that's right. Everybody deserves your attention. Don't be grading about who's spiritual and who's not. Our job's not to make the perfectly spiritual 16-year-old, it's to make a spiritually mature 30-year-old. It's a long game. It's a long game. When I became minister to adults at Taylor's First Baptist in 1998, my children were rounders. Evan and Taylor, and people knew it. You could hear the talk. They're not doing this. And I stood in the pulpit and I said, let me tell you something. I said, I know my kids aren't perfect. I said, my number one job, I said, is not to build a spiritually mature, perfect 16-year-old, but it is to build a spiritually mature 30-year-old. And you know what I got to do to get there? I got to keep them alive. My number one role is keep them alive. All right? Positive influence. This is the thing I want you to remember, the last point. Intentionally and consistently. It's directional. It's intentional. It's consistent. You're predictable. People know who you are. You're not going to surprise them. Exerted and demonstrated over an extended period of time. And here's the kicker. That achieves the desired results. That's leadership. You can do all the rest of them, but if you don't achieve the desired results, you may be a leader, but you're not an effective leader. All right? An effective leader achieves the desired results. Here's the true test of effective leadership. Did I tell you something, show you something, give you something, teach you something that was not too difficult to understand and put into practice? And when you did, it made your life and the lives of those around you better. Personally, professionally, eternally. When we first started Accelerate at the Chamber, I remember telling Craig and John Moore, I said, listen, I got all this. We got a huge group of people that are underserved, in poverty. I said, but I'm not going to participate in this if we're just making a temporary improvement in their lives. I said, this has to have some degree of internal impact. And luckily, both those, we all agreed on that. It's got to make a difference in the long term. You know? What does the Bible say? What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? All right? It's got to make an eternal difference. Here's your bonus takeaway for today. Over the long run, the most effective leadership principles and approaches meet these three tests. Number one, they're universal. They're not situational. Some people say, will that leadership approach work with Dan? Will it work with Abe? Will it work with Will? Guess what? It'll always work. It's not situational. You know, it's not for a particular class of people or for this situation. It's universal. It's a principle that will always work. Number two, it's timeless. Man, in today's world, how many things are timeless? Technology lasts how long these days? Like that, gone, vaporizes. You know, we live in such a world that change is the rule of the day, all right? Today, things are so faddish and so trendy, they're here today and they're gone tomorrow. Timeless things are worth something. It's something that worked in Jesus' day, it worked 50 years ago, it works today, and it'll work 50 years from now. All right? Timeless principles and approaches. And lastly, they're objective. They don't favor Dan because he's wearing a black shirt, or Julie because she's a female, or disfavor me because I'm wearing a blue sport coat, or because of somebody's race, color, creed, number of educational degrees, how much money they got in the bank. It levels the playing field for everybody. It applies to everybody. It works for everybody. Universal, timeless, and objective. I'm going to read one other thing from my dad's thing. I don't know where I laid it. Somewhere. Where is it? You got it? Thank you. The last thing I said, or one of the last things I said at my dad's funeral, that met the test to be universal, timeless, and objective. Thank you, Jeff. Universal, timeless, and objective was this. Here's a universal and timeless and objective principle. I said my dad, that some of the things he liked, he said my dad knew how to enjoy the simple things of life, sitting on the screen porch swapping stories, refilling the bird feeders in the backyard with black oil sunflower seed, blowing leaves, cutting and splitting wood, closing the blinds at night. In the later years of his life, taking a ride in the car on a Sunday afternoon when he had to depend on someone else to drive because he couldn't drive himself. Whether we took him to get a hamburger and parked out by Lake Hartwell to eat, or drove to Clayton, Georgia so Susan and my mom could buy vegetables at Osage, he was just glad to be with you. The place we were going didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the people he was with. And here's a principle that makes the universal, meets the test to be a universal, timeless, objective. We all need to be reminded, it's not what we do or have that makes life rich. It's who we do it with. Starting with our relationship with God Himself, our relationship with each other, and everybody that God puts within the sound of our voice and our sphere of influence. That's what matters. The business and the money is simply a platform for reaching people and reaching souls. That's it. That's the measuring stick. Just don't ever forget that. You know, we have to become transformed from being people of influence, being truly authentic leaders. All right? Any questions? Anything? Y'all are quiet. A lot of this is in the book. The book is 25 chapters. You can read it in any, and I'm not promoting the book. You've got it. You can read it in any order. Each chapter stands alone. Each chapter is a principle that meets the test to be universal, timeless, and objective. I'll give you some chapter titles. One chapter is humility is more important than visibility. One of the chapters is sometimes the things you want to do the least are the things you ought to do the most. Things like that. Those principles, they're never going to waver and they're never going to change. So you can glean some things from that, and certainly welcome contact me. Thank y'all very much.